Hello everyone. So in sixes, people do not run a spy to mid. But oddly enough, if you do run a spy to mid, it works pretty much every time and gets the med pick. Unless, I guess, you know, there's Highlander players on the other team that have some config that changes like a spy decloak into a nuclear alarm klaxon. How's that for a vocab word? But yeah, most of the time it just works and gets the med. So why don't people ever do it? Well, there's a few reasons. I mean, the big one obviously is that it only works because people don't run spy to mid, and you know, if you do it more than even once in a half, its efficacy drastically falls off. On top of the fact that even if you haven't used it at all, if you're a team that's known for doing it, then again, efficacy falls off. So part of the power of it is in the surprise play. But there's a really important driving force behind making a play like that work so well that can get exploited in other ways as well. And that's what I want to talk about today. So in a sixes game, you do a lot of the same things. Depending on how many rounds there are and how many round resets there might be, you are going to play a lot of mid fights. And a lot of these mid fights go the same way. You roll out. As a demo, you try and generally shoot the same things. Obviously, every mid fight plays out differently. So I know a lot of people think that, you know, meta is stale or whatever, which, like, you know, have whatever opinion you want. But people like doing this because even the most standard of setups of both teams are showing up to mid in the exact same doors and the exact same timings, the exact same health, multiple times, still turns out differently because you have different plans, different strategies, and you know, people aim differently from mid to mid, so it still ends up being very fun and interesting. But ignoring that, you do end up playing a lot of these mid fights and doing kind of the same things on these mid fights. And while like they are still shaken up and what have you, you're very much in a mid fight mental state where you are thinking about and focusing on the mid fight because this is just that setup that you are used to, and you know what to expect, you know what to look for because your mind has been trained through all this repetition to kind of recognize patterns. And you know, the human mind is good at recognizing patterns, so you figure out patterns, you look for different things to shoot at, different positionings to play. If you're a soldier, it's certain bomb timings or bomb positionings. As a scout, you're trying to identify their soul, all the stuff that goes into a mid fight. But when players are in a mid fight mentality, then they are absolutely never looking for a spy, right? Absolutely not. So suddenly, spy to mid becomes just good. An actual, viable, consistent strategy. And when I say consistent, I mean, you know, when it's used sparsely, of course. Which is interesting. And you're abusing the fact that a team has seen this situation so many times that they let their guard down because there is, again, a lot of repetition to some of these. I mean, you know, how often do you see a, for example, stalemate on second? I suppose stalemate is, well, how often do you see a stalemate on second on any given point? All the time, right? Multiple times per game. It just happens. And, of course, there are very consistent, well, there are go-to strategies that players take in these situations. So you just start to recognize patterns because there are patterns. And being able to abuse that pattern recognition and the fact that people let their guard down when they're presented with a situation that they think they've seen before. I just blind out their medic on last. That's nice. When you can kind of abuse that and put people, kind of lull them into a state of vulnerability with the fact that they aren't expecting certain things, or they think it's one situation that they've seen a million times before, but it's not. And this is, of course, most apparent with Spy. Spy to mid. If you have a strange Spy timing, then what do you do to make it more effective is you pressure. Which, I suppose you can consider it a distraction play, just getting people to look at you, which some element it is, for sure. But if your team just pressures as normal, then, yeah, suddenly their brain, if only for a moment, switches into, oh, they're pressuring, this is what I do when they pressure, without realizing. And you really only need, like, the medic to be distracted. I mean, obviously you don't want combat classes spotting you. But if you can effectively kind of convince the other team that this is just a normal pressure, then that play is way, way more likely. So some element of it is just, you know, if you want a Spy play to work, then you want it to be pressuring. But I think it is more broad than that, because it doesn't strictly apply to Spy. And also, like Spy timings, there are a pattern to them a lot of the time. Like if you're trying to play Spy in a stalemate or into last, that's not the rarest thing in the world. And, you know, players, if you send a double sack, for instance, players are oftentimes, well, it's usually when there's a bit of a downtime. Like if you aren't sacking regularly, then people start to expect an off class. But if someone dies, like, it's not out of the question for someone to be like, all right, I mean, they could off class now, because it's a possibility. They could always off class if they just walked their guy all the way back to spawn to switch off, but it's usually faster to just sack and then spawn on the off class. So in serious settings, when teams are trying to win matches or something, yeah, maybe on last they'll just Spy check or off class check every single time that someone sacks, which is a good measure to identify that. But by and large, it's mostly just operating on the, okay, they have a Spy. And then, oddly enough, when the pressure comes in, suddenly their thoughts, I mean, the players that need to prevent the pressure, like the spam classes, are still going to do that. But everyone else is like, okay, now we're looking out for the Spy. And suddenly, like, you are less successful than if you went without pressure. But for those timings that they might not expect, or they don't know you have a Spy, then yeah, it absolutely can work. And I have already used this demo, I'm now realizing. Whatever. I need to play some more Pugs, I guess, because I'm just going through like some historical's the wrong word, just some old stuff. Whatever. So this doesn't apply strictly to Spy. If you, for example, get a flank member behind, whether that be a soldier or a scout, and they aren't spotted, and they have an opportunity behind, then absolutely you can pressure and abuse that fact, and suddenly their pinch from behind or whatever play they're going for is going to be way more successful, because again, you've lulled the other team into thinking that it's just kind of a standard play, when in reality there's something a little more sinister going on that they don't realize. So being able to abuse the habits of players is something that's generally useful. But in the specific case of just abusing the fact that, you know, people let their guard down when given game states that they've seen thousands of times before, can lead to a lot more success if you can properly leverage that. And, you know, the textbook example is just a Spy to mid. Like, I'm not joking, a Spy to mid just works like almost every time, because it's so uncommon, and because people just really have their guard down in a mid fight. They are not thinking about a Spy unless, like, you know, you're just off-classing so much that suddenly, like, the other team doesn't even know what to think and is kind of ready for anything. No, if you show up to, you know, 4 mids just playing standard 6s classes and do standard mid plans, and then on the 5th mid you just roll out a Spy, you're highly likely to backstab that medic unless that Spy gets hurt or something with, you know, again, the Highlander configs. So yeah, I think it's something that can be generally applied, is just sort of leveraging that fact that people do like to have their guard, they like to think about potential flanks or Spy plays or whatnot in the cases where it makes sense, because again, just pattern recognition. But a lot of the time there's a lot of kind of set plans that people really let their guards down for, and that's something that can be abused. So anyway, hope you guys enjoyed. And, oh man, I just got two. Interesting. Hope you guys enjoyed, and I will see you next time.